the frankly largely uncaring nature of bureaucracy. It's as the great Milton Friedman said, money is spent most poorly when it is someone else's money being spent on people you don't know, and that's how federal spending is. And then you can't really even blame the individuals, because the way the government works is complaint minimization. So when you do try to, when someone within the government tries to stop that money being spent, there's usually someone that complains. And then their manager will say, it's not worth the trouble, just pay it anyway. That happens over and over again.
So was it worth
I think it was an important thing. I think it was a necessary thing, and I think it will have a good effect in the future.
Thank you, President Trump. This week there was a video on board a plane that showed the First Lady of France slapping her husband, Emmanuel Macron. Do you have any world leader to world leader marital advice?
Make sure the door remains closed. That was not good.
Yeah.
No, I spoke to him, and he's fine. They're fine. They're two really good people. I know them very well, and I don't know what that was all about, but I know them very well, and they're fine.
I got a little shiner here.
What do you think about
What
the
is that?
Democratic Party plan to avoid being swept in every battleground state again by spending $20 million to study how to speak to American men?
Well, you know, they spent 2.8 billion. We spent 1.5. We spent much less. We spent about half of what they spent, and at the end they were $28 million short. They had to be. They spent 2.8 billion. It's a lot, but they couldn't get 28 million at the end, and now they want to spend. I read that they want to spend money to learn how to talk. That's fake. You don't want to be fake. You shouldn't have to hire consultants to say what America needs, because then the consultants should be running the deal, not them. But I read that they want to spend a lot of money in each state. So we won all 7 swing states, 7 out of 7. We won a lot more than that. We won the popular vote. We won everything, and they want to spend money to find out what they did wrong. And I mean, I could tell you what they did wrong. I could tell you every one of their programs. When they say men playing in women's sports, I would say that's not a winner. When they say transgender for everybody, I think that's not a winner. When they say open borders so the entire world population of criminals can pour into our country, I don't think that's a winner. I mean, I just gave them that for free, but I don't know if they'll change their ways. I see them all the time. I see people that I know in Congress, Democrats, they're trying to justify some of the things I just said. You can't justify them. I always hear they're 80-20 issues. I say they're not 80-20, they're 97-3. They might be 99-1. They're not 80-20. They wish they were 80-20. And they're wasting a lot of money if they're going to continue with that nonsense.
And this
Mr.
one's
President,
a more
on
of
the
a
big
page 6 question, but back when you hosted The Apprentice, you mentioned once in 2012 that Diddy was a good friend of yours back then. He has since found himself in some very serious legal trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
Would you ever consider pardoning him?
Well, nobody's asked. You had to be the one to ask, Peter, but nobody's asked. But I know people are thinking about it. I know they're thinking about it. I think people have been very close to asking. First of all, I'd look at what's happening, and I haven't been watching it too closely, although it's certainly getting a lot of coverage. I haven't seen him. I haven't spoken to him in years. He used to really like me a lot, but I think when I ran for politics, that relationship busted up. From what I read, I don't know. He didn't tell me that, but I'd read some little bit nasty statements in the paper all of a sudden. It's different. You become a much different person when you run for politics and you do what's right. I could do other things, and I'm sure he'd like me, and I'm sure other people would like me, but it wouldn't be as good for our country. As we said, our country's doing really well because of what we're doing. So it's not a popularity contest. So, I don't know. I would certainly look at the facts. If I think somebody was mistreated, whether they like me or don't like me, it wouldn't have any impact on me.
Mr. President, on the big beautiful bill, would you like to see the Senate build in some support for your tariffs on the big beautiful bill, or should that be a standalone bill?
I have great support on the tariffs. I was so honored that we got that ridiculous stay lifted, because that would have taken away presidential power. It would have taken away everything that was granted by the founders. It would have been a terrible thing. And it would have, most importantly, would have left us vulnerable. We have a lot of countries that use tariffs on us and use them viciously, actually, viciously. And if we didn't have the power to use tariffs on them, and instantly, not when you go back to Congress and try and get hundreds of people to agree on something, that would take months to get just one simple proclamation. If we didn't have the power to counteract their powers, you wouldn't have a country left. We have to act fast. We have to be fast and nimble, as they say. And that was a really great moment, I think, yesterday when that stay was lifted. And hopefully now we'll go to court and just win that battle. Because if we don't have the power to do what they're doing to us, we are going to be a great nation no longer.
Quickly, Elon Musk was once idolized by folks on the left in this country before joining your administration. Now he's considered a hero by conservatives. Why do you think this man, what he's done in American life, has been so politicized?
Well, his life has been amazing. I mean, I look at so many different things. I look at that rocket being, guided back into position. I've never seen that before. I thought it was a space movie. I thought it was a movie. You look at what he's done in terms of communication, it's been unbelievable. So many different, even tunnels going underground, not having to go through all the process of going, he's got a company that does that. He's got so many different companies. Starlink, as an example, he saved a lot of lives, probably hundreds of lives in North Carolina. I don't even know if you remember, but I called you. They needed Starlink in North Carolina, and I didn't know what the hell Starlink was. I said, what is it? Who owns it? He said, do you know Elon Musk? I said, yeah, I happen to know the gentleman. This was before his government stay. And they said, we really need it because North Carolina was literally became an island. There was, people had no communication. They had no access to anything, and they were dying. And I called up Elon, and you can't get it because it's so successful. It's very hard to get. And he had so much of it brought over there, and they told me it was unbelievable. It saved a lot of lives. So, he's just done a lot of things. I don't think he gets credit for what he's done, but he's a very good person too. You know what? If he wasn't a good person, but he did the same things, I'd probably maybe speak differently. He happens to be a really good person who loves the country.
Mr. Musk, beautiful bill. You had indicated this week that there were some things you didn't like about what had passed in the House. What changes do you want to see the Senate make? And you had also indicated there were things you didn't like about the bill. What would you be suggesting he push senators to change in their version?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll go first. It's an unbelievable bill. It cuts your deficits. It cuts, it's a huge cutting. But there's things I'd like to see maybe cut a little bit more. I'd like to see a bigger cut in taxes. It's going to be the largest tax decrease or cut in the history of our country. I'd like to see it get down to an even lower number. I was shooting for a slightly lower number. I would have liked to have done that. But with all of that being said, when you look at the tax cut and the fact that the original tax cut, which made us so successful, we had the most successful 4 years in the history of our country, the economy, and this is going to be even better. And you see that by the reports that came out just yesterday or tonight. I guess they were released this morning at 8 o'clock. You see the kind of numbers where somebody that's a pro is like, whoa, I haven't seen numbers like this since I've been doing this. These are human emotions of professionals that have never seen numbers like, and we've just started. The bill is a great bill. It's going to be jiggered around a little bit. It's going to be negotiated with the Senate, with the House. But the end result is it extends the Trump tax cuts. If it doesn't get approved, you'll have a 68% tax increase. You're going to go up 68%. That's a number that nobody's ever heard of before. You'll have a massive tax increase. If it does get approved, you'll have a large tax cut, the largest we've ever had. When you add the past tax cuts that we got you, the Trump tax, they call them the Trump tax cuts. It's an amazing bill. It does amazing things. With all of that, it's going to be adjusted a little bit over the next coming weeks, and I think it's going to be passed. The Republicans want to pass it. With all of the great things it does, including an extension of debt, it's the extension. We have to extend the debt. If we don't extend debt, we're in default. Now, the Democrats might like our country to be in default, but in 250 years, we've never been in default. That was handed to them by a very well-meaning man that gave it to them because he thought it was the right thing to do. It could have been their problem before the election, but this man thought it was the right thing to do, and he was well-meaning. I don't hold anything against him for that, but that was put on our plate when it should have been on the Democrats. September 28th, a famous date. It should have been taken care of by the Democrats, but this person, a man of power, gave it to us so that in June that comes due. Well, we have to take care of that, because if we don't take care of it, we have a country in default, and we don't ever want to have a country in default. You know, I'll tell you, a certain senator, Elizabeth Warren, said that she would never, ever allow a default on our debt. She would never let it happen, and she would like to get rid of the debt ceiling, what's called the debt ceiling. I call it the debt extension because we really need an extension, that she'd like to see that gotten rid of. And there are many people that agree. Many Democrats agree with that. But we gave that through, and you know, I don't want to say an error. He did it well-meaning. They gave that to us. It was a Democrat problem just before the election. Would have had a huge impact on the election. And to our benefit, we won anyway, but to our benefit. But felt that really for the good of the country, we should extend that. But Elizabeth Warren and various other people would like to see that. Her whole career, she wanted to see it terminated, gotten rid of, not being voted on every 5 years or 10 years. And the reason was because it's so catastrophic for our country. And I always agreed with her. That was one thing I agreed with her on. Now, I haven't spoken to her, but I would say that if you asked her that question now, she'd say, no, it's their problem. But it's a very unfortunate situation. It's a very unfair situation. And she happened to be right on that. It should be gotten rid of, or it should simply be extended. But that's one of the things that gets taken care of in this bill. That automatically gets extended for a 4-year period, and it should be. But I agree with Elizabeth Warren on that. I think you should get rid of it. It's too catastrophic.
Mr. Moss,
Yeah, please, go ahead.
do you want to see, Mr. Moss, to the bill?
And to international students, I guess you welcome to study in the United States. And one question for Mr. Moss.
To students, well, we want to have great students here. We just don't want students that are causing trouble. We want to have students. I want to have foreign students. I think Harvard, you know, it's close to 31%. That's a lot. Our country's given $5 billion plus to Harvard over a short period of time. Nobody knew that. We found that out. I wouldn't say that was a Doge thing, but we found that out over a period of time. That was sort of a Trump thing. We ended up in litigation for other reasons because they're very anti-Semitic. And in finding out and in going through the books, we found out that the country gave them $5 billion plus, much more than that, actually. And we're having it out with them, and let's see what happens. I think we have a very good, well, it's a very sad case. It's a case we win. We can't lose that case because we have the right to make grants. We're not going to make any grants like that. But I don't think Harvard's been acting very nicely. I think Columbia wants to get to the bottom of the problem. They've acted very well. And there are other institutions, too, that are acting, but Harvard's trying to be a big shot. And all that happens is every 3 days we find another $100 million that was given. 2 days ago, we found $200 million more. The money's given to them like gravy. I'd like to see the money go to trade schools, where people learn how to fix motors and engines, where people learn how to build rocket ships. Because, you know, somebody has to build those rocket ships.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see trade schools set up, because you could take $5 billion plus hundreds of billions more, which is what's spent.
Absolutely.
And you could have the greatest trade school system anywhere in the world. And that's what we need, to build his rockets and robots and things that he's doing, and to build lots of other things. And, you know, I went to school with people. In some cases, they weren't good students, but they could fix the engine of a car better than anybody I've ever seen. They could take it apart blindfolded. They had an ability at that. And they did very well. They made a lot of money. You know, it's a very skilled job. It's great. But I'd like to see a lot of money going into trade schools. I've always felt that. And we probably found our pot of gold, and that's what's been wasted at places like Harvard. And the money's been wasted. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I wanted to ask quickly, Mr. Musk, is your eye okay? What happened to your eye? I noticed there's a juice there.
Well, it wasn't. I wasn't anywhere near France, so. No,
I didn't
making a
notice
joke about
his
the
eyes.
First Lady of France.
getting slapped, you know.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, no, I was just horsing around with Lil X, and I said, "Go ahead, punch me in the face," and he did. Turns out, even a 5-year-old punching you in the face actually does.
That was X that did that?
Yeah,
X could do it. If you knew X, you
He's
could
with his
do it.
mom right now. But I didn't really feel much at the time, and then I guess it bruises up. But I just horsed around with the kids.
I didn't
basically.
notice it, actually.
I know that you try to stay pretty neutral because not your war, but
And by the way, not my war. I just want to solve the problem for people. This was not a war that was going to happen if I were president.
right, and so not your war, but as you try to fix it, and as you survey this hellscape of the Ukrainian front lines,
It's horrible.
and you and your team deal with a very stubborn Vladimir Putin. Do you
And Zelensky.
Yeah.
But do you look at this
Very stubborn
conflict
Zelensky, too.
any differently now? Like, do you look at this and see Putin as the good guy or the bad guy?
So I've known him very well. And I went through a lot of things with him because Russia was, the Russia hoax turned out to be a total hoax. New York Times, they got a Pulitzer
Yeah.
Prize. They have to give back the Pulitzer Prize. That's my lawsuit. And they're doing very poorly in that lawsuit. But, they wrote stories about how it was true and it was false. And, a lot of Washington Post also. I have gotten to see things that I was very surprised at. Rockets being shot into cities like Kiev during a negotiation that I felt was maybe very close to ending. We were going to solve a problem, and then all of a sudden rockets got shot into a couple of cities and people died. I saw things that I was surprised at. And I don't like being surprised. So I'm very disappointed in that way. With that being said, I'd like to see it end. 5,000 people, I think the number's even more than that, but 5,000 people a week are being killed. Mostly soldiers, but also people that live in little cities and towns throughout Ukraine. And I'd like to see that stop.
And
President
I
Trump on
asked
Russia.
Caroline this yesterday, but I want to ask you directly. So many of the things that you're trying to do are held up in court right now.
Yeah.
If the courts are going to have so much influence over U.S. policy, do you wish you would have just become a judge instead?
Yeah, well, look, it wasn't meant to be that way. If you look at the founders, the president had certain powers, and you have your 3 groups, and they all had supposed to be pretty equal powers. But you can't have a judge in Boston running foreign policy in places all over the country because he's got a liberal bent or he's a radical left person. That's what the executive branch is for. And you have checks and balances. But we had millions of people pour into our country, many, many criminals poured into our country, murderers, mental institutions from all over the world being emptied out into our country. And if we don't get them out and get them out quickly, could lose your country very easily. This is a bad, that anybody would allow this to happen to our country. With all of the things, we took over inflation, we took over some wars, we took over a lot of problems that didn't exist when I was president. None of it existed. We wiped out ISIS. Other than that, we had no wars. Putin was never going to hit Ukraine. Israel would have never been attacked. That attack, as you know, Iran had no money. They didn't have money for Hamas. They didn't have money for Hezbollah. They had no money whatsoever. That wasn't going to happen. All of these things that happened weren't going to happen. You wouldn't have had inflation. So it's very sad when I came back. But the thing that is the hardest is that they allowed 21 million people into our country. And many of those people are stone-cold criminals. They moved their criminal population into the United States. And of all the things that are bad, I solved inflation, I believe, already. I got the fuel prices down. The fuel prices came down. That's one of the reasons they screwed up the energy. They screwed up the cost of gasoline and oil and gas. And you had tremendous inflation. The greatest inflation probably in the history of our country under Biden. And when people said, but the economy was hard. No, the economy was terrible for the people because they couldn't afford the energy. And the energy brought everything else up. Energy is the big deal. But with all of that, we solved that already. In 4 months, we solved it. $1.99, $1.98 gasoline. First time people have seen that in a long time, since my term. But The hardest thing to solve is millions of people pouring into our country, many of whom are criminals. Because remember, these countries are smart. Their leaders are very street smart. They're sending the people that they don't want. They don't want the people that are there, that are law-abiding, that are productive, that are working hard. They want people that are in jails. We have them. They allow them to come in. And I always look to the other side, like, why would somebody do something? You know, in business, I try and study, why would they want to do this? Why would they want to sell it? Why would they want to buy it? One thing I can't figure out is, what would an administration, what were they thinking when they allowed millions of people from prisons all over the world, not just from South America, Venezuela, all over the world, from the Congo in Africa, hundreds of people, thousands of people from the Congo, rough prisoners, from Asia, from Europe, rough parts of Europe. Why would they allow them to come into our country? Why would they do that? It's the one thing I can't figure out. And I don't believe it was Joe Biden. I really don't. I mean, look, he's been a sort of a moderate person over his lifetime, not a smart person, but somewhat vicious person, I will say. If you feel sorry for him, don't feel so sorry, because he's vicious. What he did with his political opponent and all of the people that he hurt a lot of people, Biden. And so I really don't feel sorry for him. But he wasn't a person that would allow murderers to come into our country. He wasn't a person that was in favor of transgender for anybody that wanted it, take kids out of families, et cetera, et cetera. So I just don't understand why a thing like this, how a thing like this could have been allowed to happen. Very sad. It's very sad for our country.
If I could add something to that, which is, I think the fundamental moral flaw of the left is empathy for the criminals and not empathy for the victims. Empathy for the criminals, but not empathy for the victims. And there's been way too much of that. That needs to stop. To the president's point, there's been immense judicial overreach that is unconstitutional. That was never intended. And it's undermining the people's faith in the legal system. It needs to stop. It's gone too far.
And just today, we had, just a couple of hours ago, we had a great decision from the Supreme Court, thank goodness, that was very important. We had two important decisions yesterday on the tariffs, because again, we have to be able to fight a fair fight with other countries. Howard, would you say? We have to be able to use tariffs to fight people that use tariffs on us. I mean, if we didn't have that power of tariffs, we would economically be destroyed as a country, because they will destroy us. Other countries will destroy us with unchecked tariffs. We can check them when we have the use. They tried to take that power away from us. And if you take that power away, we're not going to have a country. We won't have an economically viable country. But it's very important on immigration that we be able to get people out without having to go through a long court case. I mean, it was up to some of these judges. Every single one of these millions of people, criminals, prisoners that were let go from jails because they save a fortune when they did. They brought them into the United States. You know what they're saving? The money they're saving? But some of murderers, it's very important that we're able to get those people out of here fast, bring them back to their country where they belong. And those countries take them, because if they don't take them, they have to go through the wrath of the United States, and they take them. But we have judges that don't want that to happen, and it's a terrible thing. That's going through the court system right now, that whole situation. But when ICE and with Border Patrol, they've done an incredible job. When they do this incredible job, and they capture 100 killers and drug dealers, and we can't keep them for years here as we go through trials. We have to get them out rapidly, and we know who they are. We know who they are, and we're very careful about who they are, but we have to get them out rapidly, or again, we're not going to have a country, okay? Maybe one or two more. Go ahead, please.
That tariffs may also affect companies like Tesla, which has cars manufactured abroad, and this is also to use Musk.
Well, he's going to end up building his whole car here. I mean, I thought he built his whole car. Pretty much he does. He's got incredible factories in, like I looked at one in Texas. It's unbelievable. No, all of the manufacturers will build their parts here too. I mean, it used to bother me. They make a part in Canada, a part in Mexico, a part in Europe, and sent all over the place, and nobody knew what the hell was happening. I think it's ridiculous. You build a car, make it in America, and I gave them a little leeway on that. You know, I gave them some leeway. But over the next year, they've got to have the whole thing built in America. That's what we want. We want America to buy American-built cars. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, guys. Thank you, guys. We're heading out. Right out this way. Thanks, guys.
Good meeting.